Hi, everyone, and welcome to MORTARR Minutes, New versus Renew, Building and Retrofitting for Communities. Thank you so much for joining our webinar today. Just a few housekeeping items. Your camera is currently off, your mic is muted, and we welcome questions anytime via the chat, or you can use the Q&A that is provided as well. We will do our best to get to the questions during the webinar, but we are hoping to save a little bit of time at the end to answer any of those that we haven't gotten to. So also a quick heads up, we are recording this webinar as well, and this will be sent out via email, hopefully tomorrow, but if not, first of next week. So then you have the opportunity to share it or rewatch it if you'd like. And what we'll do really quick is we're joined by some panelists today from Boral Stone Division. So I'd like to ask all of the panelists to share their video really quick and unmute your.
You're muted.
Thank you. Hi, how is everyone today?
Great, how are you?
Great. Really quick, everyone out there, I recommend going to the upper right-hand corner of your screen and select that view option. And that's where you can then see the gallery view so that we look like four little boxes. We're doing a little Brady Bunch today. So then you can see us all and we can have a great conversation. So, well, thank you everyone, everybody who registered for the webinar for joining us today. I also want to thank my three panelists for being here as well. I would actually like to go around and just do a quick introduction. So for everyone out there, my name is Lindsey and I'm a customer success manager at MORTARR, but I like to say I moonlight as their community manager. So, and today I'm joined by Boral Stone Division. So Abel, let's go ahead and start with you. If you could just introduce yourself, share a little bit about your role and a little bit about your company too, that would be great.
Yeah, my name is Abel Becho. As you can see behind me there, I've got a 12-man flag. So I'm from Washington State. I'm a big Seahawks fan. So go Seahawks. I've been with the company for about 20 years. So got a lot of, stone experience with, Eldorado stone, cultured stone, quality stone. And I feel like I'm a good resource to a lot of architects and designers and always willing to help and go the extra mile.
Great, thank you. And Paul, let's go to you next.
For having me, Lindsey. My name is Paul Lott. I am the area sales manager for Boral, representing all brands in the Northeast. My coverage area is Washington, D.C. up into New York and all areas up and down the coast area related. And my primary focus with Boral is the architecture community and design community. And then I also do support the distribution network, but there's a big focus on the architecture community.
Great, thank you. And last but not least, Susan.
Hello, thanks, Lindsey. My name is Susan King. I am the National Commercial Account Manager for Boral Stone Division. I've been with Boral for just over 6 years, and I've been working in the building materials industry since probably 1990 in various aspects, working for distribution, and now working for the manufacturer. I also had done some interior work for an interior finish company. So I absolutely love working for Boral. I love the Stone Division, and I love all the things that we can do to help support opportunities out there. So I'm glad to be here today. Thank you.
Great. Yes. Thank you so much, all three of you again for being here today. And I wanted to say really quick too. So I've been so lucky to work with Boral Stone for their entire time being here at MORTARR. I think it's almost been 1 full year that we've had your profiles active on the site. And it's been such a pleasure to get to know Susan. I know we worked just a little bit together in the past, but it's been such a pleasure to get to know your stone and, work with your team, getting those projects into your profile. So everyone out there, I recommend, they've got 3 profiles out there, so make sure you take a peek at them. And what we'll do now is we'll go ahead and get started. We've created some great questions collaboratively here, so it'll be good. We'll go through and ask some of those. And then to everybody that's viewing, all of our attendees, I recommend if you have a question that comes up, go ahead and put it in the chat or in the Q&A. And like I said earlier, we'll answer those as we see fit and hopefully get to all of them by the end of our hour. So, all right, let's go ahead and get started. So Paul, I thought I would throw the first question your way. So to go with the title of the webinar, what does new versus renew look like to you? What does that mean to you?
So from my perspective, as I mentioned with the architectural standpoint, is there's constant engagement with the design community at both levels of new and renew. However, in my experience, particularly recently, it's a little different, but overall, new is supported, but a lot of it, we find new projects coming down the pipeline that we weren't involved with the initial stages of design or concept and selection. And we get into the process through our outside resources, particularly maybe our architectural reps from our distributor partners. On the flip side, when it comes to renew, it's more where they're looking for trying to get the developers or owners to make selections, because it's usually a lot of renovation work that is trying to bring it up to a more modernization or more useful space on the buildings, whatever that type of building may be or structure may be. So there's a lot more involvement in my perspective at the renew level. And it's usually a lot more hand-holding as well. And I don't mean that from a minimizing it, but it's a lot more of engagement from working through what we can help and what we can assist with our multiple lines of products at Boral.
Yeah, and I feel like that's something when I think about new versus renew when it comes to buildings, I would almost think there would be more hand-holding when it comes to renewing a space, just because you're already working with something that's there. It's not like a fresh, space that you're building. It's, something that's already has a little bit of history and already been in place for a while. So yeah, that's great. Thank you. And then Susan, what about you?
So yeah, I mean, new is from the ground up, and it's usually an easier process. The architect and owner group usually has a strong sense of what they're looking to do, and they can just do it from, new. But when you come to a renovation, there's so many factors that come into play. Not only is it, how do you change the existing dynamic with working with national accounts like I do? A lot of times it's just a refresh or a rebranding or bringing them up to, current standards. But the biggest piece of that is, their opportunity to expand on their space. And I look at senior living right now as one market segment that, especially because of COVID, has really done a lot to kind of change their existing space, whether it's by adding outdoor entryways into common spaces inside so that you're not walking through the entire building, or even expanding to the outdoor space, adding like almost, expanding on the livable space and creating these outdoor social areas, such as outdoor fire bowls, or even having an outdoor kitchen space where people can congregate around and think about kind of how they want to stay safe, but also be in the outdoors. So when it comes to renew, it could be interior, it could be exterior, it could be a little bit of both. And then there's also the hiccups that come with those renovations is, things that you didn't expect or see or, forecast it coming. How do you handle that when it happens? And those can take a little bit more time to work through, especially when they're not, fully anticipated in this early process.
No, that's great that you mentioned that too. And I'm glad that you brought up what we're seeing now, especially coming out of this pandemic that we all experienced last year. Is I know, we even discussed this before on a past webinar, but outside spaces are going to become so much more relevant to each of us, even though, now, we're kind of getting past the worst part of the pandemic, but, people still, you'll never get that out of your mind about being safe. And trying to put as much space between you and somebody else. And in that sense, fresh air is so important. So,
yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad that you touched on that. And then Abel, what about you? So new versus renew, what does that mean to you? What does that look like to you?
Just, Paul and pretty much covered just about everything that I was gonna say. They stole my thunder, but we'll excuse them for that. But yeah, just to kind of recap what they're saying. I mean, I think they're spot on with new construction. I mean, it's just pretty point blank. We start from the ground up, working with designers or architects and just kind of figuring out, what's going to be needed for the project, et cetera. And, as far as renew, I mean, I look at, remodel, we're doing a lot of strip malls, some hotel work, where they're, starting kind of over and redecorating the outside and the interior. So that's really all I can add.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate it. Okay, so on to the question, which Susan, I'll throw to you first. So what impact did the pandemic have on projects that stalled? Have you seen this amongst the people that you're working with and the clients you have? Maybe there's a certain market segment that's been impacted the greatest. What's your feedback on that?
Yeah, so working with national accounts, we saw many of the market segments kind of come to a halt, and then others that were continuing to drive forward. Grocery store, retail, like convenience store, gas stations, anything that had to do with automotive, tire companies, those sort of things, those stayed really strong even throughout the entire pandemic. Never saw a slowdown with any of them. Hospitality really did take a halt. There were projects that might have been in the construction phase that had to finish up, but honestly, anything that was in the design phase or that was going out to bid really was put on kind of a pause. As well as senior living. I think the big piece of that was making sure that, the elderly were safe versus worrying about construction and all of that. So much of that did go on hold. And then the dine-in restaurants, I feel like some of them had a hard time kind of figuring out how to move forward with the pandemic. How do they continue to safely serve their customers in a way that would work? And I think it worked fine initially until we got to the winter months, and they were really struggling to figure out how do you do this outside dining when things are getting colder. We did see a great impact to construction at that time. Although, like I said, there were certain market segments where construction never slowed down. It was a constant movement, and we were quite surprised by how strong some of the opportunities that were coming through to us were, even at the craziest time of the pandemic.
And I've heard that too. Just working with some of the clients I have here at MORTAR, I was hearing that they've never been busier. And it was almost hard for them too, because you're trying to be safe with your employees. However, you want to get these projects completed. So it was kind of like a toss up or like a pull of, what's the best method? Do we move forward or do you pause it? So, well, great. Thank you for that. And then Abel, what about you? What about the impact that you saw from the pandemic on projects that may have stalled?
Yeah, we've had, quite a few projects that have actually stalled, especially in the hospitality sector. I mean, just with hotels being empty and people not traveling. I mean, we haven't seen hardly anything, pop up from that segment, which has been a challenge because that was kind of a huge part of our business. But the rising cost of materials have actually gone up as well, meaning, lumber and roofing and plumbing and, even our products a little bit. But all of that have kind of combined into basically everything to where we've seen all this stuff stall. All these projects have stalled. So Susan's correct on gas stations. We've seen a lot of those pop up. I mean, I've seen a lot of HUD projects have kind of a lot of those have popped up, re-roofs, remodel type stuff, and the plan center, which we focus a lot on. So yeah, definitely challenging.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you bring up the cost of materials, because I know I've personally seen that just at like a local Home Depot or even on the news, that cost of materials has gone up significantly. And it's probably I'm assuming the halt of manufacturing when the pandemic first hit. So now it's like that trickle effect. Now we're starting to see that end part, and I'm hopeful it won't be like that forever, especially with this crazy housing market we're all experiencing. Everything costs so much more. So, well, thank you, Abel, for that. And then Paul, last but not least, what impact did the pandemic have on any projects that may have stalled that you've seen?
So the stalls are there, of course, but on the East Coast, our stalls were limited primarily to the hospitality, as everybody's spoken to. However, there were hospitalities that I was working on that were already in midstream, and we had the inventory for the product. So we were still selling a large volume of product for those projects, which a lot of people aren't thinking about, that this is what was going on in the background, and basically we're thinking that there wasn't that much going on. However, with the stalls on some of the large projects, there were still a lot of residential projects going on. So there was still a good amount of sales, which has an impact on us as a manufacturer, because we were limited in manufacturing capacities, working through some of the conditions that we were faced with, and our inventories were going down dramatically, and we were getting it out to distribution. So there was almost like a panic buying situation going on. But the residential market was where we thought we were going to see the stalls, as Abel alluded to, and it took off on us. So in my perspective of it, yes, we had some stalls, we had some pauses, as Susan mentioned, but it's been really surprising how we're moving forward and the rate at which we're moving forward right now. I actually support the residential national and regional accounts in my territory, and the record numbers that we are creating right now with that business, which none of us, not even the builders, thought that they were going to see. And just one thing to flip on that, I had a call this morning with one of our national accounts managers, and he alluded to the fact that a lot of these builders didn't have projects already developed, and it usually takes about 2 years before they're coming out of the ground with everything. And that inventory is gone now. So they absorbed all that inventory over this past year and a half, which is creating some of this demand that we have right now. So our stalls were very limited to a very small market sector in the Northeast.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And, you know, with the project stalls, are you seeing now that these projects are continuing, you know, within that hospitality sector? Are you seeing kind of the comeback a little bit?
Yes, absolutely. If that's directed to me, 100%. Even in the hospitality, they are moving forward, and they're out there, and they took the pause button off.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, we've noticed an uptick with hospitality, especially in the design stages, and we're also seeing a response now from some of these national accounts, like, you know, the Marriotts, the Hiltons, the IHG, saying, you know, they've got things that they're working on. So that's actually a really good sign of where we're heading.
Oh, good. I'm happy to hear that. I really am. So, well, great. Let's take a little shift here and go on to our next question. And Abel, I was actually going to throw this to your way first, but what process does Boral have for learning more about a project? How do you support the specifiers or owner groups, and what does that look like?
Yeah, we learn in a lot of different ways. You mean, we use local plan centers. We use Dodge, which is a kind of a national type program where we can see kind of the projects that are upcoming. A lot of the, you know, the leads and projects that we get are from us interacting with architects, doing AIA presentations and that sort of thing. And then, you know, after, obviously those are limited because of COVID, but when we would do those AIA presentations in-house, then we start getting a lot of questions from architects that are working on stuff. Our relationships with general contractors as well. And our subcontractors, which are typically masonry contractors, we work with them. They bring us leads all the time. We're all constantly communicating. We know what's kind of out for bid. We know what projects are on the horizon, and we work with them, kind of a collaborative group to make sure that, you know, we kind of follow up on all this stuff. And we support them with their technical needs. I mean, you name it, we're there to kind of support them. And that's just kind of what, from my opinion, the processes that we use for that.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. And Susan, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Abel touched on something that's really very important in this process, and that's relationships. You know, I work with the national account piece, and the thing that I've discovered is that the more they understand why you need this information, the better we can support and service them. And so one of the things that I'm always looking for is, especially from a national account, is getting a build out schedule, understanding what the construction plan and time frame is, so that we can work with our distribution partners on making sure we're being proactive versus reactive. Whether it's new construction or a renovation, we want to make sure we're ahead of the curve. So relationships are super important. And it is knowing kind of all the aspects of the project. If it's a renovation, are they, asking a lot of the questions? Are they going to stay open, especially if it's a retail or a restaurant? Are they staying open during the renovation? Are they doing piece by piece, or are they doing it, closing down and doing it all at once? What is the impact going to be if they are open to the clientele that come in, or that they're, if it's a senior living facility, for instance, how do they work around people, the residents that live there? So there's a lot of questions that, we ask that we want to make sure that we understand. And we want to make sure that we can help support them when those opportunities are coming up. So it's asking a lot of questions, playing off of the relationships that we have, gathering as much information as we can on the opportunity, getting the rendering, seeing how the installation is going to look in the way of where is the stone going up? Is it just exterior? Is it interior and exterior? And so as much information as we can gather, we will ask a lot of questions, and it can seem a little bit overwhelming to, the architect or designer when we're reaching out, or even the owner group, and say, this is what we need. And it's not because we're trying to be a pest or a nuisance. It's really more important for us to be able to service and fully understand the scope of the plan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's great that you ask all those questions too. And I would think, especially after the pandemic we just had in 2020, those questions will be continuing and be even more important, just to know what space are you going into and who's going to be in that space while you are too. So, and, I would like, oh, go ahead.
I should say, and with our current lead times, we need people to understand that there is an impact, and we don't want to wait last minute to order materials. So if we can be proactive, understand what that time frame looks like when the install is going to happen, we can try to work with the GC and the installer to get those orders in, and get the material to the closest distributor to be able to get the material on the job site when the installation needs to happen.
Right. Well, good. Thank you for that. And Paul, any feedback on that? Just what you've seen, that process of learning more about a project before your team goes in there?
Honestly, I think really what it boils down to, and Abel alluded to it initially, it's collaboration with all of our partners, but it's also the communication, ongoing communication, not only internally at the Boral, but also our outside partners. So, and a lot of our partners aren't used to that. It's a little bit different way of doing business these days, but it's a lot about the partnership and that collaboration. I think is two of the key points of what we're seeing.
Yep, I love that you say the collaboration and the relationships you have with your partners. I think that is so common amongst almost any kind of industry out there. It's those two are the key things to making a project successful. So I love to hear you all touch on that.
It's common, but it's not uncommon for it not to exist in a lot of the part of the process, which is amazing.
Yeah, that really is so surprising to hear, because it would be difficult to go into a project not knowing. It's almost better to ask. I'm a huge fan of, I'd rather ask more questions than not enough, because you don't want to be, in the middle of a project and you're like, is it inappropriate to ask this like obvious question 6 months in or a year into a project, So, well, great. Thank you for that. Okay, so our next question, Susan, I'll start with you with this. So if Boral is working on the exterior of a building, what's the process for learning about that community that this building is going into? How do you determine what works or how to proceed with that?
Sure. So it's gathering as much information as you can on the project, understanding what is the need or desire of the owner group. What is the architect trying to achieve? Making sure that if we can get photos of the existing community, or have our local area sales manager go to the area where the site will happen, and just do a little research, identifying kind of what's around. Key playing into most of the decisions is if there is a local ordinance that they have to follow, making sure that we know what those are so we can help direct the product up to what that need is for that town or community. The other thing is making sure that we're able to help support them if we have to match something, getting out there and finding out which one of our products is going to be the best fit. And also finding out, is there a budget that you're working under? I mean, that is key. And that information, the more that they can help us, is going to help us direct. We have, 6 product lines that we could be using. And we have our premium brand, which is always our first go-to. But if the budget is, lower, we need to know which product line we're going to, so we can match them up accordingly. And the other thing I think that's really important that people forget about is bringing in your manufacturing team into these pre-construction meetings and planning meetings, because the more that we can be there and understand the scope and answer questions when certain things come up. We could be talking about, what does that wall system look like? Maybe they're missing something in the plans that we could touch on. So I think that including us in those planning meetings is really important as well.
Yeah, sounds like it would be too. And it's interesting to hear you say that sometimes you'll just do a little bit of research yourself, because when we were thinking about this webinar and coming up with these questions, that's where my mind initially went. Now I'm coming as like an outsider, not really sure what the process is like, but that would always be my go-to, is I'm going to research myself, Google, whatever powers on the internet that I can find to really learn a little bit more about that community or about that building itself. So interesting to hear you say that. And then Paul and Abel, any feedback on that? Paul, when we chatted before, you mentioned that sometimes you're getting information directly from the architect, because they're the ones that really, would be the keeper of that information for you. So I thought that was great too.
Exactly, Lindsay. And to that point, is not to assume anything of the information. They're doing their research. But we just, Susan and I were working on a project here in the East Coast, and we did a lot of work with color matching, or making the selections of what was fitting the actual client's design standards. However, there was some disconnect with the municipality, and we found out that they had other architectural design standards, and we had to switch up the material that was going to be on the exterior of the building. So again, it's if you're local and you can work through some of that, but it's at least having the options that when those standards aren't sufficient, that we can come in and offer an alternative. So it's a lot of asking questions, and if there's a hurdle we have to overcome, we'll figure it out with our options. So different profiles, different colors, and everybody likes to keep their prototype or their standards from a branding standpoint, but sometimes there needs to be some flexibility if you're going to be working in certain municipalities. So that's what we're there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. And I would assume that would come directly from the architect, I would hope, or from somebody involved in the initial aspects of it to share that with you.
It's a lot easier.
Abel, and Abel, any feedback? I feel like they touched on so much great information, but anything?
I know these guys are so good. They're the best. I got to give them kudos.
Yeah.
We've had some situations too where, where the architect has come to us, the design team's come to us and said, hey, we need to match this stone. And then you go out there and check it out and you realize, hey, that's a natural stone. That natural stone was done 5 years ago. And guess what? There is no more natural stone. Can't get it anymore. It comes out of the ground. They ran out of it, or the vein changed. We've actually had to take some of our profiles and do some sort of a custom, even though we try to steer away from customs, but if it's a large enough project, we'll work on it. And basically we take the same profile that we feel fits, we match that color process through our design team. They're really good at matching color. Sample over to the architect, have them sign off on it. That, hey, that looks great. That's exactly what we're looking for. And basically they run it, get it on the wall, and it's almost seamless. It works out really well. And, and then again, another thing is we were just working on one with an architect. She says, hey, we're in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. We need a stone that looks kind of very, very similar what the landscape is, what the indigenous stone here is. And they, again, photographs, Paul, Susan, we're all really good at looking at photographs and saying, hey, you know what, this is what we think our best match is. Get the sample shipped out. They look at it and be like, yeah, that looks great. And then they, make a decision, based on that. So we're always there to kind of help and support them.
Yeah, that's great. Have you ever found, I'm sure you've done this before, but so like you mentioned, a stone runs out. So you built a building, a couple decades ago, that stone is no longer available. Have you found it pretty easy to match a real stone with a manufactured stone? Have you found that to be pretty easy before?
I'll take that just from the standpoint of working with our brands, especially our premium brands. It makes it a lot easier with the technology that we're using and the portfolio of colors that we have. However, as Abel, talked about, we can do custom coloring, and the technology, again, that we have in our plans, that they can actually take from a photograph off your phone, send it to us, and we can do a computer redesign, basically. And it's amazing what we're coming up with the technology on that. So it's actually become quite commonplace for us these days with the amount of natural stone, East Coast and West Coast, that isn't available. And as we all know, a lot of these projects are built in phases. We need to make, hopefully have alternatives to alleviate the situation of discontinued material.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. I was just curious to know what that looks like, but it sounds like you guys, with that customization, that you can actually really pretty much match that. So it's doesn't have to be a worry if you're renovating a building that's been standing for decades. You can find something that kind of goes along with it. So thank you for that. And then Abel, next question I'll throw to you first. So when you're working on a project that's within a space or community with a little bit of history, maybe it's new or renovated, but what's the process for matching a product to fit? Oh, how funny that my comment goes right into this question too. But like we already talked about, what's that process really look like? So that it can kind of blend with that space. So, one thing that came to mind when we were thinking about this question was maybe like an education space, or just, if you go into a university that's longstanding, they're always building new buildings and spaces for students. So what does that really look like when it comes to, matching the product that's been there for decades?
Yeah, we kind of just rolled right into that one, didn't we?
Yeah, we really did. That was professional.
Yeah, no, it just a matter of, working with the design team, the architect, and trying to figure out, exactly what they're after, getting their vision, looking at photos, looking at samples that they've kind of gathered, and just kind of figuring out what we think is going to be the best, match, working with our factory, and if we have to do something customized, but more likely, we have over, 250 styles and colors and shapes within our arsenal of products and brands, that more than likely we're going to find something that we already have, rather than having to run some sort of a custom. So, with that being said, I mean, it's a good process, easy process, and we're usually able to figure something out and really bring something to the table with the architectural team.
That's great. Thank you. Any other feedback? I know we touched on this before, but.
Yeah, I will say it really is gathering information, and, as these buildings come up, and, what is the proximity to the other one? How close will they be? Because sometimes we can get pretty close, but if these buildings are really going to abut each other, we need to make sure that we're looking at the route of possibly going to that custom, where if they're not exactly, they're within a vicinity of each other, but that we can get away with a standard color or texture that we have in our arsenal, then we absolutely can go that route. So finding out where's the building in proximity to the other locations, and how close are they going to be? What is the most important thing to the client or to the architect? Is it the color matchup? Is it making sure the texture matches, but the color could be a little off? Those kind of things are important for us to know, because that really directs us and how we make the selection process. And the other thing is, and we've touched on it, as many chances as we get to go to the actual structures and see what that stone looks like in person, because you can send us pictures, we can send you photos as well, but to see it in person is a completely different thing. I think all of our computers tend to either take on a more yellow or a bluer hue, and we want to make sure that we can really make decisions based on the real deal. So getting to the job site, looking at the stone, bringing samples with us to match up, because I think that really does help us in our selection process and making sure we're picking the best thing for the opportunity.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned too, having the client list out the most important factors when it comes to building it. So is the first color, then texture, and then maybe something else. But I like that you mentioned that you almost have to look at, what's your most important factor when it comes to putting, this stone on a building. What is that to you, so that you can focus. Right. So great. Well, thank you for that. And my next question is my absolute favorite one, because then you each have the opportunity to share. So please detail one of your most favorite renovation projects and what makes that project really stand out to you. The audience will love to hear this too. We just love to kind of touch on, some buildings that really had an impact on you that you still think about today. So Susan, why don't we start with you?
Okay. So it was a few years back. I had been asked to go to a senior living facility in Connecticut to kind of look at the existing stone that was on the building. They found out it was a competitor's product, and that the color or the texture, I'm not sure which, had been discontinued. So I thought it was a great opportunity to jump in. And it was a very large project. So we're talking over 30,000 square feet just of the stone. So I was really excited to get my hands kind of into it, find out what we can do. So in collaboration with our distribution partners, we had seen some photos in advance, and we kind of, based on that, knew which texture was going to be the closest fit for the opportunity. So we went to the job site. I think each of us brought our whole arsenal of colors. I think we had maybe like 12 to 15 different options, and we just kept putting them up next to and in different light. Like, what does it look like in the sunlight? What does it look like in the shade? How close are we going to be able to get to the existing stone that's on this building? And we actually did a custom blend. They were existing colors in our cultured stone line, but we did what we called a 40-40-20 blend. 40% was one color, 40% was another color, and then we had a 20% of just this added splash of color that we needed to create the perfect mix to match up against the existing original senior living building. Mm-hmm. And not only did it come out outstanding, I mean, I was thrilled to see the finished product, but when you hear from the owner that they actually liked it better than the original, and it could very well have been because it was fresh and new and there was, no lapse in time. I mean, everything over time tends to fade when it's directly in the sun, but the owner was just so happy with the end result and could not believe that it came out so good that, it was just a proud moment that we had, being collaborative with our distribution partners, getting out there, giving our input as to what we thought was going to be the best blend of color. And then seeing the end result afterwards was just impeccable. So it was a lot of fun to do that project, and it was probably one of my favorites.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I can't believe the mixing of the colors like that. I mean,
Yep.
that just blows my mind to be able to do. I mean, you just say like 40-40-20. That's so crazy to me to even think of mixing those colors to be able to make something so custom. But
Yep.
I love that.
And it worked out beautifully. And the best part is the distributor and myself were able to have a conversation directly with the GC and with the mason to talk about what this looks like and to have them understand kind of that blend. And then they do it. They're so capable and they're so skilled that they were just able to do it right on the job site. And, there was no pattern or anything that they were following. It was just the percentage of each color. And it was unique and it was fun and it allowed us all to be creative. So it was great.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. So Abel, what about you? Your most favorite renovation project, and why does it stand out to you?
Probably my most favorite project is a project we did in a little historic town called Walla Walla, Washington. And it was an old university that had been there for many years. I think it's Walla Walla University. And the building was built in the early 1900s. It was an old brick building, just masonry brick building. And working with the architects to say, I want to modernize this building, but still utilize some of the brick that's on the building. So we started talking about sizes, shapes, the look that they want. Kind of went through some different options, and we kind of zoned in on one we call our Marquee 24, and the color on it is Sanderling. So they like the color, they like the shape. It's a 12-by-24 flat with a little bit of texture. And so, they went ahead and went for it. And the beauty of the product was because it was an old existing building, they wanted something that wasn't going to affect the structure of the building. We're a lightweight product, and that lightweight product would just go over the top of that very, very easily, very smoothly. We did with job site meetings, we did partner up with one of our partners, Lott, and we wanted a product that was going to bond to the existing masonry. And you can just imagine how old this building is, and the walls weren't truly, 100% straight. It was a brick building, and they had to take sort of a kind of a leveling material that they offer and basically kind of level it all out before they're able to put our cladding on there. And then they used an air and water barrier and basically adhered the product right over the top of this existing structure. it came out beautiful. And, you know what, I'm going to post some of those pictures I have on Mortar. You know, that'll really kind of get everybody kind of excited and, you know, kind of from start to finish and kind of where we ended up with that. But came out gorgeous. And again, another key thing was partnering up with the right, you know, them selecting the right masonry contractor. The mason played a huge part of it. You know, if he didn't have the right contractor and that couldn't do it, didn't have the experience that he did, I mean, that could have become a huge failure for that project. But he did a great job, a lot of detailing to it. You know, and the project just really came out, you know, beautiful. And I think everybody was satisfied with it. And if you go by it today, I mean, it still looks gorgeous.
Yeah.
And I want to add real quick to what he said. Abel, you brought up a good point. We really can help with providing you with recommendations for the best installers. You know, a lot of times people bid on a job, and we always say the lowest bidder isn't always the most skilled individual. But there are times where the owner really wants this to be done right, and we can help align the GC or the owner or even the architect with a proper installer for that project.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you. And it really sounds like what I'm hearing, it's the artistry behind your company and the work that you do. It's just, you know, even in a space that you may not think artist first or design, you know, I don't necessarily think of that, but to hear like the customization and how you're able to work to make sure you're giving that client exactly what they're looking for. I mean, it just sounds so great. And Abel, I would love to see those photos. As you're talking about it, I feel like I want to go Google it really fast and just see what this building looks like. So thank you for sharing that project.
Yeah, I'll post some of those this afternoon for you.
Yeah, I'd love to see them. I truly would. And then Paul, what about you? Your most favorite project and why it stands out?
So this is going to be my opportunity to see what a geek I am in the industry. So mine is a 2-year process with a multifamily residential townhouse project in North Jersey that was part of a lawsuit that an HOA association brought on the contractors that built the units because of water infiltration and destroyed basically the exterior finishes of the entire complex. Mind you, we had 2 HOA associations. So there's one point working with logistics. The second one was the tightness of proximity of all the units, the multiple, I think there was 12 to 14 units altogether in each phase. However, we went through an interview process with our competitors on the different brands to be used moving forward. Once we secured and won that interview process, then we had to get and collaborate with the other exterior finish, which was synthetic stucco, so that we didn't have any problems from a drainage situation, which was the biggest fear. So of course it sounds weird, but it's an insurance claim. You're dealing with HOAs, you're dealing with really tight conditions, but we were able to work through this over a period of time. They actually, from our standpoint, increased the job for us by almost 25% on the volume of stone used, because the homeowners association decided that they wanted to go with a more modern look and remove some other exterior cladding finishes and switched it to exclusive stone and synthetic stucco. So it was a win there for everybody. And actually it increased their value from what they're saying from an appraisal standpoint, which was another win for everybody. But long story short, we were part of the interview process for the GCs. Believe it or not, they wanted our input, as Susan was saying. So that was unique and limited, but they wanted our input from there. But the biggest thing was the logistics through this project. You had homeowners that were coming in and out of their houses every day. We had to coordinate the vehicles placement, but the biggest one for us as a manufacturer is we had to partner up with our distributor to get this material on site. We weren't allowed to store any more than what was being used that week on site because of limited parking. So it was a lot of logistics. It was site inspections for us. And ultimately, when it boiled down to, they took one of our profiles and selected 5 different colors. So that was our next nightmare, because they allowed each of the homeowners of the units to select what stone they wanted to put on their building, instead of, as you see, a lot of townhouses that are all just one color and profile going across. So that's where the value increased for them, was the uniqueness of the project and their individuality of a townhouse. But it went unbelievably smooth, and it boiled down to meetings, logistics, and coordination of all of our efforts. We were very fortunate that our distributor partner was literally 3 blocks away, and that was one of the biggest key components, that he was able to store material on his site and then transport it over on almost an as-need basis. So when the stars aligned, this project aligned, but it was quite something, and we're never did the case study closure yet, but it's a great case study to talk about, and it was a win-win for everybody, from the design perspective all the way to the finished product that we presented. So it was pretty cool.
Yeah, that sounds like it. And I know when you're working with HOAs, I live in an HOA, and that's a tricky thing right there. I mean, I don't know if you've ever been to an HOA meeting, but it's, pretty intense.
I'm a member as well.
You are, so you know what I'm talking about. So you definitely know. But I love that you mentioned that the stars aligned and that this project went smoothly, because when you were telling the story in the beginning, I was not expecting that at the end.
Yeah.
I was expecting you to say, it's finally done. We implemented it. It's over. But that's great to hear that everyone was able to work together, and that, they even allowed the owners to choose, the color that they wanted out of, a certain amount. So that sounds great.
Yeah, thank you.
One thing I'd like to point out is, and Paul and Susan probably utilizing, and I know I did, is we have a really good technical team, and our technical team played huge parts of, technical questions like, pounds per square foot, what the stone weighs, how it's going to adhere, and partnering up with those other manufacturers. And our technical team is fantastic. They're there to help, and we utilize them every single day.
So Abel, just to back up on that, and I neglected to mention it, we had to fly our technical team in for the meetings for this whole thing. So that's just, the resources that we had, we would have had it in the pandemic, we would have been doing these calls like we're doing today, but we had the resources to fly Jeff and a couple others in to do it. And that's what solidified everybody's confidence that we could get through this. So it was one of the key factors. Mm-hmm. Thanks for bringing that up, Abel.
Yeah, thank you. All 3 of those projects sound great. So thank you for sharing them with us. And if you have images of any of these, I know if I'm interested to see it, I'm assuming our audience members would love to see that as well. So please feel free to share them. Mm-hmm. So, all right, well, it looks like we have just a little over 10 minutes left and just a couple more questions. So Susan, I thought I would throw this next question your way. So, are you seeing projects come up for renovating a space that have been vacated or closed down? Are you seeing requests to renovate or retrofit these spaces at all?
So I actually have a national account that we signed on this past year. It's a medical dispensary. And what they do is they actually try to utilize spaces that have been abandoned and kind of rework them to fit their design scheme. And they have a very standard look that they want for every one of their dispensaries. However, with that said, every space has their limitations and their obstacles that they're going to have to get through and try to work through to figure out how to make this work. And that's where it's really key for us working with the architects, because they'll know what the existing building looks like, how they're going to be able to incorporate the specific look that they want. In this particular one that they use are one of our brick veneer products. It's a manufactured brick veneer product. And they want to make sure they incorporate it on the inside, that they have their signage with that. They try to do it on the outside, and sometimes that isn't always possible. But like I said early on, it's getting through what are the hiccups or problems? How do we get through these? How do we solve the problem and still keep the integrity of the look or design that is intended for this existing building? So it's a matter of just working closely with this particular group, but it's been a lot of fun seeing these abandoned or vacant buildings being reused and reworked and creating a beautiful new space and design.
Yeah, and that's huge for the community too. It has to be tough to see, some kind of business leave a space and just leave this emptiness there. So it's huge for the community to fill that in with someone that will, for their products or for their business, whatever that might be. So
yeah, and it's also following what the local ordinances are as well, because when you're taking, an existing building, you have to learn all of the aspects of what does this entail. And sometimes the intention might be for that brick veneer to go up, but they find out that the local ordinance says, well, you can only have a field stone. So now we have to rework the design and change things up a little bit. So we're here to be flexible and nimble with the groups that we work with and make sure that we can accommodate those requests or those needs.
Yeah, thank you. So Abel and Paul, same question. Are you seeing just spaces within a community that, may be vacated or closed down, that you're now seeing projects come forward to fill those spaces?
You can go first, Paul.
Thanks, Abel. I have in two aspects, and the two that are really big for us right now in the marketplace are retail shopping centers that had vacated. They might have had vacant space at the time and just chose not to do it, but it was the ultimate time for them to do it because of the competitiveness. And there is quite a few people that are looking for the brick and mortar store. So that competition standpoint and doing it from a retail center, but also inner city. I know one in particular project was a apartment complex or a hotel. I'm sorry. They turned it into an apartment complex because this particular hotel was a suite setup that they already had the kitchens and the bathrooms in there. They just had to do some retrofitting, but they are actually looking at adding our stone because they wanted to make it feel more of the residential feel and more of the warm feel. And that was the big thing. And we actually are part of a study with the Shopping Center Association that the addition of our stone to retail spaces, it's a warm, affecting feeling that draws their potential clients to come in and purchase from them. So that's the same aspect from the hotel being converted into apartments, was creating that more warm, the warmth of, some other textures, in particular stone, both inside and outside, mainly in the common space areas, the entranceways, but also in the exterior. So yeah, I mean, they were the two big ones that we didn't even really think of with what was going on, and it happened, and it was a big plus for the industry right now.
Yeah, that's great.
Oh, that hotel project, was that an affordable housing deal?
I'm sorry?
Was that an affordable housing project with a
it actually has a mix of both. Yeah, it actually has a mix of both. And that was the interesting thing, was the affordable housing is mostly nurses and students that live in the direct approximation of the hotel, because any of the police officers or nurses in that immediate area, and when you say affordable housing, they all qualify for it. And it's the perfect place for them to work right where they are and with limited amount of travel needed. So yes, that's a big one, is the affordable, which I'm sure you're going to allude to.
Yeah. Well, we're just starting to see a lot more of it.
It's big for us here on the East Coast right now.
That's great. That's great. So Abel, any projects that come to mind for you for a vacated or closed space, or just something to like redo a building?
Yeah, no, there's a growing chain out here called Gravity Coffee. It's like, do we really need more coffee stands? And apparently we do. Coffee is on every corner out here in Seattle and, Washington State. And these guys just have an aggressive build out, and they've been taking old buildings. I mean, we're currently in the process of fishing up an old Burger King. They took this Burger King, closed it down, they bought it, and completely just cladded the whole thing with our product, and it absolutely looks gorgeous. And maybe that's another one I'll send photos of and post on Mortar so you can see how that works, but we'll get it done. But yeah, most definitely we're starting to see, some retail spaces, things like that are getting kind of redone, remodeled, and companies like coffee companies going in there doing that. So
yeah, great. Well, thank you for that. And then the last question I have here is, and Paul, I thought we could start with you on this one. So how does Boral create a positive experience for those that they're working with on a project? What are your thoughts on this?
So you're throwing me a softball on this one, because a few years back, we didn't do this, and we implemented this a few years back. Only recently have we been able to start this whole collaboration that we all spoke about earlier, but we are engaged with the design community almost immediately, especially on these reno projects at the concept and design stage. And when they know that we're through with the tech support, as Abel mentioned, and we discussed as well, even through the bidding process and pre-construction meetings, and then also getting out and doing site visits during the process, it gives everybody a sense of confidence of what's happening here with the construction, and not, you know, there's the old thing, oh, there's something that's going to go wrong, and, you know, who's managing it, and it's all about the lowest price. If there's the management on all levels and the communication, it's a positive experience, and that's what we've created with our partners. And I shouldn't say that it didn't happen in the past. It's just, it's a lot more efficient and fluid today than it was in the past. So it's a great experience, usually from start to finish, as long as we're engaged at the initial start, or as soon as we can become engaged with the process.
That's great. And Susan and Abel, any feedback on that?
Yeah, I mean, I always tell people, you know, when it comes to the work that we do, we want everybody to lean on us. We are the product experts in our field. And when we don't know the answer, we go to those technical people that work directly with us. We're lucky to have a what do they call them? A technical
Field service representative.
Field service representative. I want to make sure I got their title correct. We have one in every single region, so we can lean on that individual, and we have a great director of our technical services. And we are also very active on the NCMA, which is our association for, it's the NCMA, National Concrete Masonry Association. And that's the guideline for our installation process. And we have a member of our staff that is I want to say
Director.
board member, a high fluent person on that team. So we have somebody that comes directly, it is directly affiliated with the NCMA. So we feel like we have product experts, a strong technical team. We have national presence across the United States, where any opportunity that you're working on, we have presence for product right in that region, right in that area that we can help align you with. And we also have our dedicated teams locally. So, you know, I work across the United States and Canada, and I work directly with the area sales managers in each market, depending on where the project is happening. So I always feel very strong with our team support at that local level as well. So we have a great dynamic team of experts to help support any project.
That's great, thank you. Abel, any feedback on that?
How much more positive can you get from working with the three of us? But
Exactly.
I mean, these guys are absolutely right. They've kind of covered everything that, you know, kind of what I was thinking. And one thing that I could add is, you know, with Susan, we're not only national, we're international. You know, we're all over the place. You mentioned Canada, you know, Mexico, Europe. I mean, we're all over the place. And you know, and Paul mentioned, you know, from start to finish, you know, we start the project from the very beginning, from the design phase to the construction phase, and, you know, working with the subs and getting everything kind of finished up and buttoned up. I mean, we've had situations where other manufacturers have had problems and they just kind of walked away and said, you know what, that's not our problem, you know, and
True.
Pride and say that we don't kind of roll that way. You know, we try to, you know, stand behind a product and we finish it and we make sure we do it right. And again, the key thing is working with the right subs and the right masonry contractors to make sure it gets done correctly. So, and that's all I got for you.
Well, thank you for that.
And I will add on that real quick. It's also about educating. And so we try to do our best to educate our installers, to educate our architects and designers that are doing the specifications, to make sure that they understand the process. And we also want to make sure we keep them up to date with any changes that are happening in our industry. So just really constantly educating the people that we work directly with to know what is going on within our field, and our ability to support them closely in that aspect.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for all of that. And I was going to say too, that I've had such a great time learning more about the three of you and just hearing the passion behind your voice for what you do. So if any of you come with that, count me in. That works for me. It's been just so enjoyable to learn more about this. And thank you for participating in this webinar with Mortar. We greatly appreciate it. I'm getting some feedback right now. Great job. So thank you so much. I think this has been very informative for all of our viewers out there. And like I said, this is being recorded as well. So I'll be sharing this with you three panelists, but also with everyone out there who registered and is watching the webinar. So thank you again for attending, everyone. And we'll be seeing you guys soon. So thank you so much and have a great day.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Lindsay.
Thank you. You too.
Bye, everyone.